SKOL Vikings, let's win this game.
The Minnesota Vikings came out of their preseason loss to Baltimore with more questions than answers. A former Vikings edge rusher's massive new contract is already drawing criticism and validating Minnesota's decision to trade him. Meanwhile, Kevin O'Connell revealed an important role for a rising wide receiver, while J.J. McCarthy is facing a troubling prediction even after delivering a direct message about the injury scare that ended his night early. The Minnesota Vikings' decision to trade veteran edge rusher Jonathan Greenard to the Philadelphia Eagles is already receiving some early validation, although the final verdict will depend on what happens during the 2026 season. Minnesota knew the move would weaken Brian Flores' defense in the short term, but keeping Greenard could have created a difficult contract situation. After acquiring him, Philadelphia signed the 29-year-old defender to a 4-year, $98 million extension, worth an average of $24.5 million per season. That massive commitment made Greenard the National Football League's highest-paid edge rusher this season, and it has already attracted criticism before he has even practiced with his new team. Garrett Podell of CBS Sports included Greenard on his 2026 National Football League all-overpaid team, pointing to the financial risk created by his contract, recent decline in production, and current health concerns. Greenard has spent training camp on the physically unable to perform list because of a pectoral strain suffered while lifting weights. Podell noted that the connection between the pectoral and shoulder areas makes the injury particularly concerning because Greenard's 2025 season was already affected by a shoulder problem. The Eagles are betting that Greenard will recover, regain his previous form, and reproduce the quarterback pressure he generated before his numbers declined. When healthy, he has demonstrated that he can become an elite force off the edge. During his first season with Minnesota, Greenard played all 17 games and recorded 12 sacks, 18 tackles for loss, and 22 quarterback hits. That production made him one of the most important players in Flores' defense and appeared to establish him as a foundational part of the Vikings' pass rush. Last season, however, he appeared in only 12 games and finished with 3 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, and 12 quarterback hits. The drop in availability and production made a long-term investment increasingly dangerous, especially for a player approaching his 30s. Minnesota was not escaping the 4-year extension because the Eagles negotiated that deal after the trade. Still, Greenard may have wanted a new financial commitment, potentially creating the possibility of a contract standoff if the Vikings had kept him. By completing the trade in April, Minnesota avoided having to decide whether to match Philadelphia's enormous offer or risk carrying an unhappy veteran into the season. It remains far too early to declare the Vikings the clear winner, because Greenard could return to full health and deliver another dominant campaign for the Eagles. If that happens, Minnesota's pass rush could miss him badly. For now, however, Greenard's injury absence and the criticism surrounding his contract suggest the Vikings may have made the responsible decision. Philadelphia accepted the long-term financial and medical risk, while Minnesota avoided committing nearly $100 million to an aging defender coming off a disappointing, injury-shortened season. Greenard still has the talent to change the entire perception of the deal, but the earliest evidence is beginning to support Minnesota's judgment. The Minnesota Vikings did not produce many offensive highlights during their second preseason game, but second-year wide receiver Ty Felton gave Kevin O'Connell an encouraging reason for optimism. Minnesota failed to score a touchdown, finished with fewer than 300 total yards, and committed 2 turnovers, making Felton's performance one of the clearest positives from an otherwise frustrating outing. The young receiver caught 3 passes for 66 yards, including an impressive 50-yard reception, and secured all but one of the passes thrown in his direction. Felton's production was especially important because his role within the offense had remained uncertain after a quiet rookie season. He recorded only 3 receptions for 25 yards during his first year, leaving Minnesota searching for another dependable option behind its established starters. That lack of immediate production helped motivate the Vikings to pursue veteran wide receiver Jauan Jennings in free agency. Jennings is expected to operate as the 3rd receiver behind Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, creating a talented and experienced group at the top of the depth chart. However, O'Connell's comments after Saturday's game made it clear that Felton also has a distinct place in Minnesota's plans. The head coach praised the receiver's training camp, and explained that the Vikings want him to continue learning multiple positions because versatility will define his game day responsibilities. Felton is expected to provide depth behind the top 3 receivers, while giving the offense a different skill set through his speed and explosiveness. His ability to line up in several spots could become extremely valuable if injuries affect the receiver room, or if O'Connell wants to create favorable matchups without changing personnel. Felton does not need to replace Jefferson, Addison, or Jennings to make an impact. He needs to understand every assignment, execute consistently, and remain prepared whenever his number is called. O'Connell emphasized that consistency is now the next step in Felton's development. Strong practices and one productive preseason appearance are encouraging, but the Vikings want to see him stack successful days together and build upon the progress he has already made. Felton's responsibilities will not be limited to the offense. O'Connell also identified him as an important player for the 48-man game day roster because of his potential contribution on special teams. As a rookie, Felton returned 7 kickoffs and averaged 25.4 yards per return. He also handled both punts and kickoffs at different points during his college career at Maryland, giving Minnesota several possible ways to use him. That special teams experience strengthens his roster value because reserve receivers normally must contribute beyond their offensive snaps. Any remaining uncertainty about Felton's place on the team appears to have disappeared after his performance against Baltimore and O'Connell's public endorsement. The Vikings now seem prepared to carry him as a depth receiver and return option, with the possibility of expanding his offensive responsibilities if he continues developing. Felton entered the preseason needing to demonstrate that he could become more than an inexperienced player buried behind Minnesota's leading receivers. His 50-yard catch displayed the explosive ability O'Connell believes can separate him from the other reserve options. The challenge now is turning that flash into dependable weekly production. J.J. McCarthy's position behind starting quarterback Kyler Murray has become even more uncertain following the Minnesota Vikings' 13-3 preseason loss to the Baltimore Ravens at US Bank Stadium. McCarthy played throughout the first quarter and completed 5 of 10 passes for 81 yards while taking 1 sack. Carson Wentz entered afterward and delivered the more efficient performance, completing 9 of 11 attempts for 92 yards despite being sacked twice. Although McCarthy has generally appeared positioned to begin the season as Minnesota's second quarterback, Judd Zulgad of Purple Daily believes Saturday's game provided more evidence that Wentz will actually serve as Murray's primary backup when the Vikings open the regular season against the Green Bay Packers on September 13th. Zulgad's concern centers on McCarthy's continued inconsistency. The young quarterback demonstrated his potential when he connected with Ty Felton for a spectacular 50-yard completion that moved Minnesota to Baltimore's 10-yard line. McCarthy then completed a short pass to Demond Claiborne for 7 yards, placing the offense within striking distance of the end zone. However, the promising possession ended without points after McCarthy failed to complete 2 important throws. He fired a pass too high and too hard toward Felton in the back of the end zone before missing Miles Price, who had created separation near the front corner. Instead of placing the ball with enough touch for Price to make a comfortable play, McCarthy delivered another fastball above his receiver's reach. Minnesota eventually turned the ball over on downs, wasting its best opportunity to score a touchdown. Those sequences explain why evaluating McCarthy remains so difficult. He can produce an impressive deep completion that demonstrates the talent that made him a first-round selection, then immediately miss throws that a National Football League quarterback must consistently complete. Zulgad also argued that McCarthy holds the football too long, allowing pressure to reach him and increasing the number of unnecessary hits he absorbs. Wentz may not offer the same developmental upside, but his experience could give Minnesota a more predictable baseline if Murray is injured or unavailable. That possibility carries additional importance because Murray has an extensive injury history. A backup quarterback may be required to enter a meaningful game without warning, and the Vikings must decide whether McCarthy's potential outweighs the stability Wentz currently provides. Zulgad therefore predicted that McCarthy will begin the season as Minnesota's third quarterback rather than automatically retaining the backup position. After the game, McCarthy accepted responsibility for the failed red zone opportunities. He said the coaching staff called effective plays and acknowledged that those were throws he needed to make. McCarthy did not believe he was operating too quickly under pressure, instead describing the misses as valuable preseason experiences he can use to improve. That response showed accountability, but the Vikings ultimately need execution rather than explanations. One preseason game will not determine McCarthy's entire future, yet Saturday represented another missed opportunity to create separation from Wentz. The flashes remain visible, but so do the accuracy, timing, and consistency problems that continue to threaten his place on Minnesota's quarterback depth chart. The Minnesota Vikings received an encouraging update from J.J. McCarthy after an injury scare created concern during Saturday's preseason loss to the Baltimore Ravens. McCarthy absorbed several hits while Minnesota's reserve offensive linemen struggled to protect him, and Kevin O'Connell removed the quarterback earlier than originally planned after team doctors examined him on the sideline. McCarthy was visibly uncomfortable, immediately raising questions about whether he had suffered another injury that could interrupt his development. O'Connell did not identify the specific medical issue or confirm whether McCarthy would miss upcoming practices, but the young quarterback later provided a direct update. McCarthy acknowledged that he was slightly banged up, but insisted that he was healthy and ready to continue working. That message allowed the Vikings to breathe a sigh of relief, especially considering the extensive injury history that has defined McCarthy's professional career. He missed his entire rookie season after suffering a knee injury during the preseason that required surgery. McCarthy then missed 7 games in 2025 because of 3 separate problems: a high ankle sprain, a concussion, and a hairline fracture in his throwing hand. Any new physical concern will therefore receive immediate attention, even if it ultimately proves minor. Although McCarthy appears to have avoided another serious setback, his performance against Baltimore did little to resolve the questions surrounding his role. He completed 5 of 10 passes for 81 yards and missed several manageable throws, including an overthrow of Miles Price that could have resulted in a touchdown. The lack of consistency became even more significant because Carson Wentz outperformed him for the second consecutive preseason game. Wentz completed 9 of 11 attempts for 92 yards, demonstrating the experience and stability that could make him Minnesota's preferred backup behind Kyler Murray. Social media speculation intensified after the game, with more observers questioning whether McCarthy will actually retain the second quarterback position. O'Connell previously explained that he wants every quarterback in the room to feel genuine competition, and that the coaching staff will use the remaining weeks to determine what is best for the team. McCarthy probably did not lose the backup job solely because of Saturday's performance, but he certainly failed to strengthen his position and may have surrendered additional ground to Wentz. Minnesota must also consider what both quarterbacks produced last season. Across 5 starts for the Vikings, Wentz finished with a higher completion percentage and a better touchdown-to-interception ratio than McCarthy recorded during his 10 starts. Minnesota went 2-3 with Wentz and 6-4 with McCarthy, while Max Brosmer started 2 games and finished 1-1. Those records do not tell the complete story, but the comparison reinforces why the competition remains legitimate. The immediate priority is McCarthy's health, and his own comments suggest he expects to be available. Once the physical concern disappears, however, the larger football questions will remain. McCarthy must process plays faster, improve his accuracy, and show that he can deliver dependable quarterback play. He survived the latest injury scare, but his hold on the backup position may be more vulnerable than ever. Minnesota's preseason has created major questions and a few encouraging answers. The early concerns surrounding Jonathan Greenard's contract are beginning to validate the Vikings' decision to trade him, while Ty Felton appears ready to claim a meaningful role on offense and special teams. At quarterback, Carson Wentz continues to pressure J.J. McCarthy for the backup position, even as McCarthy insists he is healthy after another frightening injury scare. Do you believe Wentz should begin the season as the second quarterback? And will Minnesota regret trading Greenard? Leave your opinion in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for the next Vikings update. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings. Let's go.